and the omnibus. So I was forced into the Archers when I was a child. And look, it's come back to bite me later on.
I'm awash with the stuff.
The Archers is the world's longest-running radio show, with more than 15,000 episodes broadcast. Despite being a rural flavour show, The Archers is recorded in the heart of the UK's second-largest city.
Imagine this scene, the heart of a small community, a local shop. And it's suddenly facing down a brand new competitor, literally right on its doorstep. The pressure is immediate and pretty intense.
Right. That's exactly the situation we're exploring today.
And our source material for this deep dive gives us this really unique window into that pressure. We've got audio excerpts from a long-running show about village life.
Mm-hmm. And they focus specifically on the conversations between the staff who actually work in that shop.
Exactly. So we're going to listen in effectively on their discussions as they grapple with this threat. Our goal here is to help you quickly zero in on the crucial insights.
The challenges they're facing, the different ideas they're batting around for survival, and also those very human dynamics that kind of bubble up when a team's under stress.
Yeah, and you'll hear some conflicting ideas, definitely, some surprising feedback too, and maybe even a little bit of personal drama that just adds another layer.
It always does, doesn't it?
So let's get straight to it. What does this competitive threat actually look like for the shop?
Well, it's described as a news store. They call it Underwood's Local, or sometimes the EV store. Mm-hmm. And the staff, they feel it's literally on our doorstep, stealing our business. It's not some distant problem, it's right there, immediate.
And you see that impact reflected almost instantly in, customer engagement, or maybe the lack of it. They put out surveys, right?
Yeah, but they only got 16 back.
Yeah.
16. Despite serving, as they say, considerably more customers than that.
Wow, 16, that's not a lot to go on.
No. And that low response rate, it's telling. The staff themselves note it means people are slipping through the net.
Right.
It sort of suggests customers aren't really motivated, perhaps not enough to offer feedback, good or bad.
Okay, so they know they're losing ground. They're not really hearing from customers. How do they react? What ideas start coming up for fighting back?
Well, you immediately see some wildly different philosophies emerge. One very strong idea is to directly confront the community.
Confront them.
Yeah. Call a village meeting and essentially guilt trip them.
Guilt trip? How would that work?
The proposal is literally to tell the villagers that customer disloyalty means the shop is finished forever. Kaput.
Wow.
The thinking seems to be underscore the consequences of not shopping there. This idea that disloyalty is rarely rewarded.
That's an aggressive stance, isn't it, toward your own customers? Seems pretty risky. Did everyone agree with that approach?
Oh, absolutely not, no. There's clear pushback straight away.
Okay.
The counter-argument is, focusing on disloyalty could just alienate people even more. A better approach, they suggest, is to remind people why the shop is inherently valuable. Focus on the positives.
Okay, that sounds more constructive. What benefits did they identify? What should they be highlighting?
Convenience is a big one. The new store, apparently you have to drive or cycle there.
Right.
Whereas their shop is right there. Easily accessible, unless maybe you're already en route somewhere else.
Makes sense. And price, that usually comes up.
They do acknowledge that service station shops, which this competitor seems to be linked to, they're notoriously expensive.
Uh-huh.
So the village shop should, in theory anyway, have a price advantage there.
Although,
yeah,
there's a little bit of intel that comes through, isn't there? From an internal source, later seems to be someone connected in the community, that maybe that price advantage won't last.
Yeah, that's the worry. This source says the competitors' introductory discounts could last right into the summer.
Ooh.
Which, erodes one of the key benefits they were hoping to lean on.
So, okay, external threat, very limited feedback, conflicting ideas on strategy. They do try to make use of the few surveys they did get back, right, looking for common threads.
They do, even though they admit it's hardly a representative sample.
And what do they find in those 16 surveys?
Well, despite the tiny data set, one theme does manage to stand out. Staff friendliness.
Ah, friendliness. Or perhaps the lack of it. How's that feedback received?
Well, this is where you really see the internal dynamics flare up. When this feedback comes up, one staff member, Susan, she immediately gets very defensive.
What's her reaction, specifically?
It's a direct denial. Can't be me. I'm always extremely friendly. Just like that.
Yeah, and how did the others respond to that?
Oh, they contradict her. quite directly. And you can feel the heat a bit. Comments like, I'm not sure who else it's referring to. And even, that's obvious, it's you.
Ouch. That's pretty blunt. That sounds like a really tough moment for the team.
Yeah.
Is there any attempt to sort of understand why this feedback might be coming through? Or when it happens?
Yeah, there's a suggestion. It might be specific times, like maybe the mornings. Someone mentions observations from time spent at the dairy nearby, trying to pin it down.
Right.
But the core conflict is really just a disagreement over whether there's even an issue to begin with, particularly from Susan's perspective.
And this whole conflict over the friendliness feedback, it then leads them to start questioning the surveys themselves, doesn't it?
It does. There's this suggestion to try and figure out who wrote the anonymous comments by looking at the handwriting.
Seriously, try and identify the anonymous feedback.
Yep. And they actually think they do identify a couple of people. Barry and Justin Elliott.
Okay.
But this identification then leads to a really striking proposal about what to do with that feedback.
Uh-oh. What's suggested?
The idea is actually floated to just bin the surveys, get rid of them.
Yeah.
Specifically from anyone they decide is unreliable or maybe a hostile witness.
Hostile witness. Good grief. Who fits that description in their eyes, and why?
Well, Justin Elliott is seen as potentially in cahoots with the EV station.
Ah, so connected to the competitor. Potential bias.
Right. And Barry is flagged because of some past personal grudge.
Right.
Something about a magazine subscription, apparently.
Wow. So instead of actually dealing with the feedback, the first reaction for some is to just discredit the source based on perceived bias or old issues.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Such a clear example, isn't it? How personal feelings, loyalties, past arguments can completely interfere with objectively processing information, especially when that information feels critical or negative.
Yeah, it really is. But thankfully, someone pushes back against just binning the surveys.
Yes, thankfully. One of the staff, Ian, he argues really strongly against that idea.
What's his point?
His point is pretty clear and frankly sensible. He says, look, if even one customer thinks we're unfriendly, then that should trigger some kind of change.
Right.
He insists they need to actually listen to the feedback, regardless of who it came from or what they think about that person.
That really highlights a fundamental difference in approach, doesn't it? Should you value all customer input or only input from people you deem, reliable or on your side?
Exactly. And this whole discussion about service, it naturally leads into a broader look at what customer service even means in this particular shop.
And Ian tries to bring in some outside perspective.
Yeah, he draws on his background in retail, specifically menswear.
Yeah.
His philosophy seems to involve, positive engagement, maybe encouraging customers to buy a little extra upselling and focusing on getting them to come back. Standard retail stuff, maybe?
How does that land with the others?
It meets immediate resistance. Pretty strong resistance, actually.
Why?
Well, the reality of their customer base, and perhaps even their own financial situations, gets brought up pretty quick. The point is made that both customers and staff are financially challenged.
Ah, okay.
So this idea of upselling just feels really out of touch. Or maybe even inappropriate in their context.
Yeah, that highlights how a sort of generic retail model might not just plug and play into a small community-based business like this.
Precisely. So the conversation then shifts. It moves towards how they can improve service through constructively critical feedback among themselves as colleagues.
Okay. How does that go?
Well, this is where we get some very specific and honestly quite funny examples of past interactions that get flagged as maybe not ideal customer service.
Oh, really? Like what? Give us some examples.
Okay, so things like one staff member, Jim, apparently telling a customer, Richard Thray, point blank, that low fat means packed with sugar.
Okay. Unsolicited dietary advice. Got it.
Or another one, Joy, insisting a cyclist buy low-tar cigarettes instead of his usual brand.
Why?
Because he was complaining about being breathless.
Oh my goodness. Health intervention via cigarette choice. What else?
And then there's Susan again. Apparently she always steers people towards Decca coffee. Like always.
Good directive.
And maybe the most striking one, the incident with Jazza. He wanted to buy a good luck card for his friend's wedding.
Yep. Seems normal enough.
But Susan refused to sell him one.
Refuse the sale. Why?
Because, supported by Jim and Joy, they felt Jazza needs telling every so often because he could be tremendously tactless.
Wow. They refused a sale based on their assessment of the customer's social skills. That takes the idea of customer service into a completely different realm.
It really does. But what's absolutely fascinating about these examples is the the surprising level of agreement among some of the staff, Jim enjoyed particularly, that this kind of intervention, pointing out healthy options or even correcting perceived social missteps, they see that as actually part of customer service.
Seriously? And what's the justification they give for that view?
They basically say it's because the customers aren't just customers. They're also friends and neighbors. So the lines are incredibly blurred, aren't they, between being helpful as, say, a concerned friend and being maybe judgmental or intrusive as a shopkeeper.
Yeah, that really raises that core question, doesn't it? In a close-knit community, where does customer service end and, personal opinion or neighborly intervention begin? What one person genuinely sees in helpful advice, another might easily see as unfriendly judgment, or just plain nosy.
Exactly. It's this fundamental disagreement about the shop's role. Is it there just to transact goods efficiently and pleasantly? Or does it serve some broader social function that involves, guidance and maybe even correction?
So Ian, seeing all this, he makes one last attempt to kind of bring it back to basics, right?
Yes.
Suggesting they simply agree to be really positive.
Yeah, just a simple plea for positivity. But even this meets resistance.
Oh, come on.
Yep. One staff member, Joy, she pushes back. Says something like, they're perfectly capable of being positive without needing Ian's menswear expertise. Thank you very much.
Ooh, a bit prickly.
It shows that sort of underlying pride, maybe, and resistance to suggestions from the outside, or even from within if it feels like criticism, even simple ones.
So, okay, while all this is going on, the shop staff wrestling with external threats, internal friction, disagreements about basic service, we also see personal pressures affecting their lives outside of work.
Yeah, that's right. And that obviously can impact their state of mind even when they're in the shop. There's this parallel storyline involving Helen, who works in the shop, and someone she's recently gone on a date with, a guy named Dane.
Okay, what's the situation there? What's happening?
Well, Helen is experiencing pretty significant anxiety because Dane hasn't replied to her since their date the night before. Radio silence.
Ah, the post-date text anxiety. We've all been there.
Exactly. And she confides in Ian about this. Ian knows Dane, apparently.
Right.
And she's incredibly anxious, like asking Ian to contact Dane for her and report back immediately. She wants specific details, including the exact tone of voice Dane uses. It puts Ian in a really awkward spot.
Yeah, that's asking a lot. How does that play out? Does Ian do it?
He does. He has this slightly awkward encounter with Dane in a car park, I think, trying to casually find out how the date went without revealing Helen's panic.
Delicate operation.
Yeah. Dane praises the food, says it was fabulous, top marks, and he confirms Helen was indeed his companion, mentioning she supplies cheese or ice cream, connecting her to the local businesses.
Okay, so far so good. But then Dane turns the tables on Ian, doesn't he?
He does. He asks Ian for his take on her, on Helen.
What does Ian say?
Ian, probably trying to be diplomatic and supportive but not overstep, just says she's great.
Okay. And later, Ian presses Dane again about it, still trying to get info for Helen.
Yes, later on, Ian brings it up again. How did things really go with Helen?
And Dane's response this time?
This time, Dane starts teasing him a bit. He brings up Helen's incredibly uptight cousin, clearly implying Ian, who apparently tried to make Helen leave the date early.
Okay.
Made her look mortified, according to Dane. And he jokingly asks Ian if he always embarrasses women like that.
That sounds like classic winding up. Yeah.
It absolutely is. Dane quickly admits he was just winding you up. He confirms he knows Ian is Helen's cousin and her bestie because Helen had told him all about Ian.
Okay. So the teasing was affectionate, maybe. And the good news for Helen finally comes out.
Yes. Dane shares his actual feelings. He says he liked her. He thinks she's amazing.
So why the silence? Why no message?
The simplest, most mundane reason. A technical glitch. The message he sent just didn't send. Failed.
Oh, for goodness sake. All that anxiety and worry caused by a tech fail.
Exactly. Classic modern dating problem. There's this moment of frantic relief as Dane resends the message right then and there. Ian relays this to Helen. She gets it on her phone. And she finds it so sweet and lovely. Huge relief all around.
So this personal thread, it kind of wraps up with Ian reflecting on the stress of being, emotional support crew for Helen's relationship anxieties. And Helen feeling much more hopeful, thinking maybe she and Dane might be a good match after all.
Yeah, it just shows, doesn't it? Even outside the intense business pressures, the people involved are dealing with their own anxieties, their own communication challenges in their personal lives,
Right.
and how misinterpretations or perceived silence or even just simple technical failures can cause really significant stress.
So bringing these different threads together, you see this small business facing a serious external threat. And that threat immediately highlights all these internal disagreements, these communication struggles among the staff.
Yeah, whether it's about basic strategy, how to receive feedback, or even just defining what customer service is in their context.
And then you see a parallel in the personal story, right? Where miscommunication, that perceived silence from Dame, navigating a new relationship, that also creates pressure and reveals underlying anxieties.
Exactly. Both scenarios really underscore how stress, internal or external, can really impact perception and interaction, how we read situations, how we talk to each other.
The core tension in the shop, it seems, is just the difficulty of finding a unified way forward when the team can't even agree on really fundamental aspects of their job.
Yeah, like how to take feedback or what good customer service looks like, especially when they know the customers personally, as friends and neighbors. That complicates everything.
And perhaps the biggest takeaway then, looking at both the shop dynamics and that personal story with Helen and Dane, maybe it's this. Consider how differently people can define something like helpfulness or good service, and how easily communication can just go wrong. What feels like perfectly reasonable advice or a normal interaction to you, whether that's telling a customer their low-fat choice has sugar, or sending or not sending a text message,
Right.
it might be interpreted completely differently by the person on the receiving end, especially when there's history or personal feelings or just plain anxiety involved.
It really leaves you thinking about those subtle boundaries, doesn't it? You know, when is being helpful actually supportive, and when might it cross over into judgment or maybe just create unnecessary anxiety for someone else?
That's a really good question. Something to keep in mind in your own interactions today, perhaps.
So, what are you doing now?
Just getting ready for the next episode. Just
And,
moving mics around again.
So, what do you do?
I do the spot effects on the arches.
Are you what we call Foley then?
Kind of. Yep. That's,
Okay. And these are all part of the paraphernalia of production.
yeah, that's the ball bar.
This one.
Yep,
Haley so wanted to be in their own place when their baby came. It's due in 2 months. Not much chance of that now. I mean, it would have been a stretch for him finding actually mind, but I just wish there was something practical I could do to help him go along.
I think The Archers has had this immense popularity over the years, basically because it has always very accurately reflected the reality of life and living in a rural community at whatever